this panel on industrial enterprise solutions, what you've really shown is the game's changing entirely. Each one of you, whether you've made comments like GIS management and BIM brings order to chaos, and very much we've seen how it's just changing things. And you very much focused, practically your first word were EPA and place-based go together, and very much highlighted what it needed, which was leadership, and very much about story maps and integrated technology, and how you're moving towards sharing of code. And then, Alex, you gave us a new insight into the electricity industry, the electric world I know. If we don't have electricity, it's one of the most frightening things to citizens. It's the one aspect, if somebody really nasty wants to get at you, cut the electric and it frightens citizens more than anything else. So it was very, very, very interesting. And then, of course, we went on with Casey, you showing us all that predictive analysis, which certainly asked me questions. I could see many ways where the kind of, when you show us Paris for $100,000, well, that's pretty disruptive to many, many people in this world. And I know similarly, you'd probably be able to show us something similar, and these are the kind of ways of the future. And then very much, Liliane, with your work, we know the Sustainable Development Goals are just being passed. In September, our presidents, our prime ministers, even the Pope is coming to New York to sign up to the Sustainable Development Goals. And absolutely, due to some really hard work of some individuals in this room, we now have geographic information, geographic location as an important part of that, which will mean that between now and 2030, as part of the measuring and the monitoring and the assessing, always it will be geography. But you're already showing us that and giving us an insight as to how people can look at things differently, and also how it empowers citizens. What I'd like to ask you is, this is great, but how can we ensure that the whole of industry across the world really knows about these changes? What are those challenges about getting the message out? Because I have to say, some of you represent very, very big companies, and some of you have absolutely managed to give fantastic examples. But equally, I was reading something in Money Week, and Money Week's one of those magazines that claims it's the UK's best-selling financial magazine. And they too have recognized last month that it's all game-changing, and they've recognized that people like JCPenney, absolutely on the back of vacancy rates in car parks, decided to invest, and that was all done by satellite technology. Very much 6,000 Chinese factories are being translated into a new manufacturing index using spatial information. But how do you think we can make sure over the next 1 to 2 years, universally, not just in the developed world, but in the transitional world and the developing world, we can make a difference across industries?
I really see that much of our challenge is as much an adaptive challenge as a technical one in getting this information out. And what I mean by that is our industry, the design and engineering profession, dominated by engineering leads and project managers, aren't really born to collaborate. And I really believe, and we do at Atkins, that that the innovation that is due, the step change due to our profession, is really about having cross-functional collaborative teams. And I do believe that until that happens in our industry, where maybe our next realm of project managers aren't engineers, but are really maybe information managers, that's where I think we'll start seeing the real changes and the cross-function across our industries. And I think it's an adaptive challenge. It's about people as much as it's about technical solutions.
Right. So, Liliane, can I ask you, you've seen things in the developing world and the developed world. What additional things can we do?
Well, actually, I think there is a common theme here as well, and that is transforming pixels into useful information. I was very interested in case what you mentioned about that platform which has so many sensors and only 1% is actually used. And I was equally impressed, of course, by the animation and by the data which you showed. Well, I think we find similar that environmental decision making, you often have a lot of data, but decisions are not made at the pixel level. You have to understand the polygons. You have to understand the decision maker's needs and work often towards this windows of opportunity where the information actually can be transferred into actionable decision to improve decisions. So the way how we use that is that we are focusing our efforts now not so much on getting more and more high resolution data, but also in engaging the stakeholders into adaptive management, engaging them into activities where we learn how to do systematic planning, how to do systematic and adaptive way of understanding this environment which is so complex. So I think this is adaptive management and converting pixels to polygons. It's another, I think, common theme.
And you talked about leadership. And with your clearly very strong IT and engineering background, you've seen so many revolutions. But I'm very conscious in where I've been involved in the last 4 years as the sort of founding co-chair of UNGGIM, which is the United Nations Committee of Experts on Global Geospatial Information Management. Basically, one of the things we've seen is statistics is very, very recognized. You can go anywhere in the UN and everyone understands the word statistics. You go anywhere in most places and they struggle with our word geospatial. When we bring it down to place-based, as you did, location, people start to get it. And thankfully, because everyone's got something on their phone that shows a map, people are beginning to get it. But I'd like to learn from you, if we may, what more can we do?
So I think you actually really touched on the point. Particularly in the developing world, most people have access to a mobile phone and they have an internet connection on that mobile phone. They often don't have a larger device with which to view data. So making sure that our maps, that our stories are mobile friendly, that someone can get meaningful, useful information on their mobile phone will really make a huge difference in getting the word out about how valuable geospatial data is. After the earthquake in Nepal, there was a worldwide effort, which many of you may be familiar with, to update maps of the area and make those available to people locally on the ground for emergency response. And that was crowdsourced. We had one of our guys at our agency who apparently was one of the most prolific updaters because he ran into someone at the White House who said, "Oh, you're Jimbo 732 or something like that," and was just astonished he had updated so many maps. But crowdsourcing that data, getting that data out to people where they can access it in the middle of a field on their mobile phone is really what's going to make a difference in getting the word out about the value.
Thank you. Casey.
Yeah, I definitely second everything that Ann said, and to throw out a couple of platitudes, actions speak louder than words, and seeing is believing, and I think that really holds true with these things. When you describe them in the abstract, okay, that sounds vaguely useful, but when people really see the results of it, and especially when they see it in their hand. So I think we can really thank the people who have brought some of these GIS technologies to the consumer. I'm a user of Waze and Google Maps and all these things on my phone, and you really get how much productivity they can add to everyone on a personal level and from a business perspective. And so getting these things onto mobile devices in people's hands, I think, is a very important thing. And I would also say that getting the technologies out there in the universities, I think Bentley and a lot of other software companies are very big on donating software to universities and getting these young kids firsthand knowledge of using this stuff, because when they start getting their hands on these SDKs for the kinds of technologies that we're showing here, they come up with solutions that we never dreamed of. And I think that's really a very fruitful avenue to pursue.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that technology and mapping technology are helping us also not just to show statistics, which is great, but also to tell a story. And engaging decision makers emotionally have been a huge difference for us. What I can explain with numbers and statistics, if I can show just one image, I found that often local decision makers truly understand that, and we quickly became on the same page. So this is very important to us.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to move on from that question. And one for you, Alex, if I may. And I'm then going to turn to the audience, because some of you are sending me bits of paper, but I can always have a hand up, you know. I'm sure somebody could run around with a microphone. But, just in case you think I'm disobeying Sanjay, I'm not. He told me we were going till 1:15. And then we're out of here, okay, for drinks. Just in case you're wondering when it's ever going to finish. So, Alex, one for you. From the audience, could you comment on the growing importance of new remote sensing technology and standards for improving accuracy of geolocation of underground infrastructure?
And finding value in geospatial information is tough in the industry, and value of accuracy is one of the examples. And accuracy, as we all know, is a very expensive thing. So depending on the application, the accuracy may not have as much value as we want to believe. So new standards, I cannot really speak to a specific standard that is apparently is not referenced in the question, but overall it will continue depending on the application of that information. It requires knowledge of the industry for geospatial providers to understand the value of it, and Google and Microsoft did a great job consumerizing GIS. But in order to industrialize it, we really believe that geospatial industry needs to educate and enlighten other industries about the opportunities and possibilities, and actively seek GIS and geospatial champions in other industries to actually uncover that value and empower their own industry to progress geospatial technology in that space.
Has anyone else got experience of working in underground? I've certainly seen an outstanding model in the Middle East where, you know, it goes right from air quality right down to underground, all using OGC standards. And what was absolutely amazing was seeing the buy-in of the head of the water utility and the electric utility, both obviously separate, but both buying in, that they really could understand their infrastructure.
And just a quick comment, Vanessa. As we know, the trend that is observed internationally and in both in developed countries and developing countries is urbanization. And that brings more and more value to underground facility mapping and accuracy and tools and technology and techniques associated with that. So we'll see more and more of that come into our backyard and front door as well.
And I think really the hybrid is the word that's operative when you want to get more detailed information. Really, the underground is not that different from indoor. So there's technologies like beacons, as well as some of the inertial sensors in the phones. I think by doing, as drones become cheaper and cheaper, I think mapping using either point clouds or photographic technologies, all these things can combine to make this a pretty tractable problem, I think.
Excellent. Are there any questions out in the audience? Well, yes. Would you care to introduce yourself, please?
I'm enjoying the panel, thank you. My name is Michael Hauk with ASPRS. My question is, we started in the areas of photogrammetry many, many years ago, over 80 years ago, and basically making measurements off of pictures. And today, of course, the nature of pictures has changed. We take pictures from satellites, but now from UAVs. It's all changing. But we're the Geospatial Information Society, we're the U.S. member of ISPRS. My question is, how do we define the industrial enterprise? Isn't that something that's changing today? And if so, what new geospatial needs and opportunities are being created by these changes in the nature of the industrial enterprise?
Well, I could certainly say that industry is changing. In some ways, things like digital printing are making it possible for industries to get smaller and smaller. There have been, decades of corporations getting larger and larger, and I think a lot of these convergence of trends of miniaturization of sensors and miniaturization of all the technology, the ability to communicate with the cloud to do the heavy processing. I think you can imagine more custom-built solutions, devices that are digitally printed, but with built-in GIS technology communicating with the cloud to create sort of industries that we never really dreamed of, because people at a very small human scale with a small number of people can generate just some amazing solutions. And I think we once again, put this stuff in the hands of university students and watch them go.
Thank you.
Well, I can add to that as someone who is a part of what I believe a traditional industrial enterprise. And if you had this conversation 10, 15 years ago, really the answer would have been completely different. But if I look back at a recent 10 years in Schneider Electric history, the whole enterprise has changed by introduction of a whole lot of interest in software solution, digital services, building smart devices and sensors. Nowadays, every single device that Schneider Electric manufactures has a digital connectivity. That is what changing the world. So the company is transitioning from just manufacturing, packaging, and shipping components or devices into the business of managing these devices, collecting and managing the data that we get from these devices, and trying to figure out which data we can absorb and deal with the velocity of that information coming in. So that is quite a bit of a fundamental change.
Thank you. Well, it sort of brings us on to probably the final question before we do a bit of wash up. The real question is, please could you comment on EPA's consideration of the Internet of Things and ways in which you will engage field sensors as more and more emerge focused on the agriculture and water and other applications in the EPA geospatial platform, even suggesting, as we've talked about in other areas, public-private partnerships with even utility companies.
So absolutely, I didn't realize I was talking about the Internet of Things so much. I'll have to keep that up. So I think that, and I was just thinking about this as you were talking about all the sensors and every device being Internet enabled. So the Internet of Things, the ability to have sensors out in the field is a real game changer for the agency, because if you imagine either from an enforcement standpoint, when you're trying to make sure that someone's not exceeding their emissions targets, air, land, water, either having someone to have to go out and sample that, or having to count on the regulated community to sample that, is very different than having a sensor. And one of the great examples is when I started at the agency, I was talking with someone in our research lab in Raleigh, and they were explaining that they actually train people to look at smokestacks, and by the color of the smoke coming out of the smokestack, tell whether they're in compliance or not. Now, I would say that's not a very scientific method for determining whether someone is in compliance. Imagine instead, where we're going now, putting a sensor in somewhere in that smokestack, and 24/7 being able to see whether they're in compliance. Huge game changer for us. Then you can take that data, you can put that on a map, and you can see in your neighborhood, in your county, your city, down the street from you, whether everyone's in compliance in your neighborhood. I remember 20 some odd years ago when I moved to Vancouver, that's Vancouver, Washington, not Canada, there was a paper mill down the road, and in the winter you could literally taste that paper mill, right? It was just gross. And over time that's been cleaned up, but I could imagine wanting to see a map and see what the emissions were from that paper mill, and we could do that now. We could have real-time monitoring. The other big use is being able to gather general environmental data. We have this thing called the Village Green, which is a big bench right now with lots of sensors in it that will tell you about air quality. There's some in North Carolina. There's actually one in China right now at the embassy in Beijing. I expect the data from the suburban one in North Carolina is a little different than the data we're seeing from Beijing. But there are about 10 of these around the country, and what we're trying to do now is figure out how to make those smaller and less expensive. So you could imagine deploying those air sensors all over the place. You could imagine people with individuals sharing air sensors that are attached to their phone, right, and providing that sensor data back to the EPA to get a picture of air quality. We're also doing that in water in places. We're putting sensors in rivers and lakes and gathering data from them. There are lots of challenges with that, but you can easily see how we can be able to start mapping that data and giving you an idea of what your environment is like.
So Alex, you know, in the utility industry, certainly in the UK, for instance, a gentleman's already been round to my house and told me that I've got to have a new smart meter that's going to tell me every minute, because they would like the digital dial in my kitchen, and I happen to live in a really old house, and I'm just worried about, you know, the look and feel of this on the wall, but I'm going to have a digital meter that clearly tells me my consumption in the last minute, my consumption last, you know, hour, and on a cold day, how much is going out through the windows. So, you know, is this how we are all going to be monitored, in your opinion?
Well, that saves you money, Vanessa, because really with this advanced metering infrastructure and smart meters, there is no need for people to walk around and read the meters and figure out how much to bill you. Also, it helps automated reporting of outages, meaning that utility knows automatically what customers are subject to outage. And only with the introduction of consistent monitoring and automated reporting, we see the improvement, or at least a good measure of reliability in the US with all of the safety, SAIDI, and other metrics that utilities are automatically subjected to. And now, as Anne is talking about compliance enforcement and monitoring, it's not until we automatically determine compliance or non-compliance we can actually make sense of it. So that is one of the reasons why automated metering makes life better and less expensive for consumers and of electrical energy. But these devices go further. They actually help out figuring out the potential overload before it happens, so we can prevent situations like rolling blackouts that happened in 2003 in North America. Even though there were different root causes that, including some software glitches and system limitations, having ability to determine potential overload allows to manage and localize all of these outages and deal with weather events that are very disruptive. So that is the future of old infrastructure. It's becoming smarter without being totally replaced.
And certainly we're seeing that in the construction industry as well, aren't we? Throughout the whole of BIM and compliance is what it's all about. And certainly my own government has been quite a keen follower of this, in fact, a leader in some ways. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think what we've managed to do is really understand this game-changing environment, whether it be in construction, whether it be in environmental protection and the IT related to it, whether it be to, you know, you really are going to challenge a few business models with under $100,000, managing to get that kind of resolution of Paris. and learning all about the changing electric and energy models. And then, of course, absolutely the monitoring, which is going to become so vital for us to be able to make the difference to the planet that we really need to do in order to meet the targets that our governments are going to sign up to in September. So with that, I'd very much like to draw it to a close, and thank you very much.